Good morning from Easier Habits Live, your 8 a.m. business live stream. I'm Alec.
And I am Meg.
And today we'll be talking about setting intentions. We'll be following up more on outreach. And we will also be continuing to talk about how to create more focus in your work routine. So,
nice.
First, the communication tip.
The communication tip. Okay, so another busy weekend. And one of the things that I'm finding is as I, work on this outreach, right, there are certain patterns I fall into of kind of like automatic responses where I stop really thinking about what I'm doing and just I'm like, okay, cool, great. And so, as I've kind of talked about the triaging those conversations that you have. Sometimes that's okay, but you have to make sure not to get so caught up in that you have one of those responses for a message that actually requires a little bit more. And so as part of kind of this triaging thing, I figured I would tell you how I triage mine, because I thought that might be a little bit of a good insight for you into how you might be able to do yours. So when I see my messages, right, I have them very frequently across multiple platforms in various, different formats. So sometimes there's comments on posts, sometimes there's private messages, sometimes there's email. And because of the nature of social media, my private and public accounts are all kind of interconnected, not completely, but I'll get, kind of professional-ish type messages to my personal Facebook account, for example. Even though I can post as Meg Sorensen Coaching and Consulting, I don't generally get private messages to that because people want to talk to me, the person, not me, the company or whatever. And so when I'm going through everything, I put things in a few different categories. I have a family category, and within that, family needs response or family doesn't need response. Because, for example, on Facebook, I have a group chat always going with my siblings and my mom, and it's just always there. I don't have to respond to it. I like to check in occasionally and I'm alive. But, it's not something that I have to really spend a lot of time on necessarily. But then sometimes I'll get an email from my grandpa that I would like to respond to. And that one would be, again, when you have needs response, there's two. I want to respond versus I have to respond, right? They asked me a question that is time sensitive or that, for whatever reason, I need to get back to them as opposed to just kind of pleasure. And I don't always write this out. In fact, I don't usually write this out, but I do have different folders that I can put emails and things like that. So at least as far as the emails, it's easier to organize that way. Wants response / needs response. Then I have things that are just not related to anything, random things. I belong to this group on Facebook called Buy Nothing. Obviously don't have to be checking those all the time, so I kind of relegate those to another group. And then I've got people that I consider work associates, but non-emergent. So they're not low priority, but they're not I must respond immediately, right? So those kind of go into that middle bucket of these are people that I would like to respond to if I have time, and there might be ones in there.
They're long-term relationships, but with whom you're not working on a project immediately right now.
That's a great way to put that. And so again, those are ones that I admit to frequently kind of leaving out of, if I'm pushed for time or something like that, if I'm not actively working on something with someone. And that's a place where I'd like to get better because those can often end up being the most productive relationships, right? By continuing those.
Kind of like a schedule for checking in.
Exactly.
Occasionally and making sure that you reach out to them.
Yes.
So often.
Yes. And so that's one of the things that I was working on this last week as far as my outreach was reaching out to those people more frequently. And then I have the category, of course, of I'm working on a project with them. I need to stay in contact. What have they sent me? What do I need to send them? Kind of a thing. And so those are generally the first ones that I deal with. And so as I have done this, right, you've got kind of your little chi-square of important and emergent, important but not emergent, emergent but not important, and then not emergent, not important. And
Urgent?
I'm thinking
Emergent.
I'm thinking emergency, See, English? Like, whatever. I don't know. I'm making up words all the time. Emergent means like coming out or about to,
Yes.
That's silly. Urgent, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So urgent importance, trying to minimize the not urgent, not important ones, but also making sure that those do happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, balance. And also trying to minimize the urgent, not important. I have a tendency to spend too much time there. The ones that are urgent, but not important. And so, focusing on the important ones, even if they're not necessarily as urgent in the long term, for me has a higher payback, whatever, return on my investment. So that's how I triage all of those. You can think of your own system, but something that you can kind of like, okay, this is how I respond and when and everything like that.
Yeah. That was not just 3 buckets. That was like 5 or 6 buckets.
It was 5 or 6 buckets.
Quintaging. Or sexaging. Is there another prefix for 6?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Well, let's just add a 7th and it can be septaging.
Yep, septaging. All right. So, having those buckets, listening to that, we definitely should try and find ways, like either with Loomly or something else, where we can remove all of like unless it's like, I'm assuming if it's a family emergency, someone will call you. So like remove like email messages so you don't have to like check those, and just one less thing to worry about while you're trying to get through your messages,
That's
doing
true.
outreach. So.
Although I did also find out this last week on Thursday or Friday that my phone's not working as a phone. Like I can receive and send text messages, but I can't do phone calls. So I need to contact my provider.
Figure that out. Yep. So, but yeah, that's one thing we should look at as we like try and do Loomly. I don't know if Loomly does email, but
I didn't see email on there. It just was the social stuff.
Right.
So I signed up last week and got all my accounts kind of lined up. And there's like, oh my goodness, this is cool. It's all here. And then there's also kind of like, well, but it doesn't have that thing, or I don't know yet how to do this thing. So I'm still kind of playing with it a little bit.
Do you get work emails to your personal email?
Sometimes, but not Meg Sorensen Consulting work emails. Those all go to Meg Sorensen Consulting. But I have other ones like with my work with Michelle and other things like that.
All right, that's in some ways outside your practice. In some ways related, but like that's kind of Meg has a long-term venture she's working on that's kind of one of those high-risk, high-reward things, meaning like it could be years before that pays off. Like if so, she'll own a big chunk of a cool show, but or a chunk of a cool show. I don't know. I'm not necessarily a big chunk, but like she'll own, right? And so that's one of those interesting projects that's not part of the immediate practice you're trying to build, but like nominally work.
But it is what's going to be bringing me to Tokyo in a week and a half. There's, like right now, there's a lot of stuff going on with that I haven't been able to help out with because I've been working on my marketing and it's, been a balance. But so that's, but those ones, I guess, are kind of in my, like, if you're going to talk side hustle, right?
Exactly. And that's how I would think of it, you know, like, and so... when you're working on your primary work as much as possible, again, this is kind of like the focus thing, I would figure out ways to cut back on streams of communication that are, that are extraneous to that thing, so you can, so you have less to think about. Yeah. And then, of course, you can, like, on your lunch breaks or other breaks that you take or after your workday, right? Like, you can go through that. You can take 15-minute breaks or whatever and respond to an email, but, like, time box that to, like, 15 minutes and then be like, all right, I'll do more at lunch or whatever, right?
Yeah, well, and that's what I, again, have started the process of doing is figuring out how I do that. And so like this last week I went through, and I belong to, a bunch of various groups or whatever that I'll get notifications for that I'm really not participating in. Maybe I will at some point, but it's kind of that idea of like when you declutter, you can get rid of stuff, especially if you know you can easily reacquire if you need it at some point in the future.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time doing that with like stuff, but when it comes to, like groups and stuff online that I could always just rejoin if I needed to, that's really easy for me. So I went and, left a whole bunch of groups, especially like ones that have regular messages going back and forth that aren't actually, that I'm not participating in. As well as honestly just unsubscribing from all the stupid mailing lists that people sign me up for, even though most of those go into my promotions folder or, something like that. They're still kind of part of that digital clutter. And so clearing that out so that because every once in a while something important gets sent to one of those folders. So if that happens, I could easily find it. And yeah, so again, just getting rid of the excess so that I can focus on the stuff that matters.
All right. And so last week you said, it was a short week. There were 4 days. 3 of those 4 days you were able to hit 35 pieces of outreach. All right. Are we upping that this week?
So there's a part of me that wants to up it, but there's a part of me that now that I have been able to streamline that process, I want to use some of the other time to work on my content creation and uploading because, again, one of the things that is particular for my audience that I've actually talked to our marketing consultant, Jeremy, about is the fact that there's not a lot of people running ads in this space, right? And
sorry,
reposition. And so it's hard to tell if that's because there's low demand or if people just aren't running ads in this space. So, either it's great and I can really stand out by doing that, or people don't do it because it's not effective. And so, there's going to be some trial and error that was going to need to happen there. But from the, personal experience and market research that I've done, one of the biggest ways that, Japanese people will hear about something is through other people, right? But they have to be able to show something. And so I've been working for the last month or so, kind of figuring out what that content's going to be. Working with this awesome guy named Nobuyuki, who is, a high intermediate, low advanced learner of English at this point. And he's kind of helping me frame what's going to be most useful because he fits really nicely into my client avatar. And so I do want to spend a good chunk of this week working on that so that I can have that up because I'll be in Tokyo, and he's probably going to come up and visit so that if he wants to show other people or if he knows other people in Tokyo, hey, I am going to be focusing on, a lot of this other work, but I will have some downtime where I can, do my own outreach and networking while I'm there. And so I want to maximize that time for sure.
Okay. So, keeping the outreach number the same, 35?
Yes, 35. And then add it to my actual digital posting. And so that'll be at least one post per day. That's a public content post rather than just a repost or a comment on somebody else's stuff. So original content, which I haven't been doing the last week or so. And so, yeah, that's going to be, and the content creation of that is going to be a bit of a chunk this week. I'm hoping to start getting that streamlined as well, though.
Okay. Are you going to have time? So one of the things we wanted to get out is Loomly, hoping that can make the response faster. Are you going to have time in there to try that out?
So I tried Loomly.
Okay, you did?
Yeah, I tried it last week. I signed up on Friday. Okay. And used that this last week. And so I've kind of got a sense of what it can and can't do. And that's where I was saying that, the Facebook messages, right? I connected it to my personal account, but everything that posts is to my page, right? And so as far as the private messages, it only shows the ones that go to my page rather than to me personally. And so I'm still going to have to go into Facebook to triage those ones. And that's something that I can usually do pretty quickly, at least as far as I can look through and say, okay, these are those top level contacts that I need to go into. And then as I click on them, obviously they get marked as read and I can respond and everything like that. And I'm also in the process, though, of getting those ones that are important moved over to Line, which is the Japanese like WhatsApp, or the WeChat is what people use in China, Line Japan, whatever. But I didn't see Line on Loomly, and so there's there's things, but it's not a social media platform. It's more of a connecting communication thing. It's just like messaging and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's something where I could look into. Zapier allows you a couple free, like, very simple integrations. And so, like, if Loomly has a Zapier integration where you could send it things, you could theoretically send it emails or Line or things from other sources, as long as Zapier can integrate it with it. And that's like their business model is connecting different applications. So, so like often, basically, well, and it's Zapier is kind of like connecting things without APIs. Like, so like they've already coded the connections or certain standard connections, which means like it's like there may be things that you absolutely can't do and you would have to code for.
Yeah.
But like you can, but they'll have like an app like Gmail or something like that. And he says. And so you'd have when Gmail get, and then I'll have a list of events, like pre-programmed events. So you could say when Gmail, receives email with this filter or something like that. Then, and then you'd have like, your other app like that connects with it, whether Loomly does or not, connect to Loomly, send as message from Gmail or something. I don't know. But like, it's kind of like one of those like, you could create a sort of like drag and drop connection without coding them, as long as Zapier has it and they have a big library of stuff. So, and that this third-party thing integrates with that. There are other like much more advanced systems where I know you can do that if you want to pay like $500 a month.
Yes, which we're not there yet. So, yeah, and that's kind of one of the balances, though. As we scale things up, there might be a point where that becomes a worthy investment, and so it's about figuring out what those are right now, and bootstrapping it as needed, but also, putting the money
finding
there.
that balance. Yeah. Like the $30 or $40 a month for Loomly really might be worth it, but like 10 times that much, it's well, maybe if we're having 10 times the outreach, that would make a lot more sense.
Right.
So, all right. Well, so I think then there's a plan in terms of that content and how much you're going to do that. We've been using Loomly, and has that been helpful? Like, it doesn't do everything, but how helpful has that been on Friday? Was that on Friday?
So it's nice because I can, the greatest thing that it does is I can go through comments a lot faster. So I still, I'm not sure how much I'm going to use it because it doesn't even do like LinkedIn messaging.
No.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, having worked there, I'm sad about like how often it fails to work. Like, for instance, I can't share directly YouTube videos on LinkedIn.
Right.
Like, that's broken. And you're like, really? YouTube is the second biggest search engine after Google. And like, I can't post stuff from YouTube.
Yeah. That's
tough. Sorry, bashing LinkedIn, but
LinkedIn does good things too, right? And there's, issues with everything, so...
I don't know. I feel like for one of the major networks, their interconnectivity with like getting shared to or sharing things on their platform from other places is kind of disappointing.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that like I'm still going to be fine tuning it a little bit, and it's also possible that I just hadn't figured out how to do it yet. But I do like with Loomly, not only do they have like you can, it's a lot easier to see all of the comments across your posts and everything, but it's a lot easier to schedule posts and things like that, so that I can have that handle, once I get all of my content as I'm making it, right, have that, okay, schedule it to post here on this day and then there on that day, and it's got all of the integrations with the different social networks. So that's super convenient.
There are free resources if like for people who are looking just for scheduling. There's things like Buffer, I think, that allows like up to 3 social networks, and you can schedule posts. Like if you just need that, there are some great programs that have like a free tier that you can use, and the idea is that like as you get bigger and you need more analytics and have more more social media accounts of various varieties, you can upgrade or whatnot. So there's other things for that, but like
if I'm needing it for the messaging I might as well use it for the other things that it has. So that's kind of what I'm weighing right now, like all right, no, I don't have to have it for this thing, but is this thing useful enough that because I can also do that it actually increases the value?
The more things you can do in one place and make your life simpler versus going into multiple applications. The better it is, and the more focus time that you can have. So less tasks switching. All right, well, that sounds good. One thing I noticed that was just funny from last Friday is I was talking about the importance of like transitions and how I was having, a challenging time transitioning from lunch to afternoon. And then when I talked about like rituals, like maybe I should have a meditation transition ritual, I'm like, I should do that for the morning after the video. And I thought it was so funny just observing myself, how my brain, like, that's not as hard a transition for me, right, as like lunch to like focus at work, right? I'm just doing one type of work to another type of work, and like there's a clear ending for that. And just like my lazy brain just wanted, like, the first thing I thought of was not what I needed the most. It was the easiest one to implement. Like, I did a meditation transition from doing the video work to, doing, other stuff for my coaching practice or, getting big contracts, etc. So, I just thought it was funny as what I was observing. And like very typically our brain's first reaction is, what's easiest, which is not always a bad thing, actually. But
well, because it can help you with that inertia and getting momentum going. I just have to make sure that, like, when I'm doing that, I'm not using it as like a cop out or something like that to replace what actually needs to be getting done.
Right, and it's always good to start easy, but you want to start easy working on the most important thing.
Yes.
And it was like, for me, it's definitely my like post-lunch to work transition and getting like back into that focus groove, because I have some momentum in the morning with videos, etc. Especially now that I'm working out before these videos, because we switched our schedule up. So I'm working out before those, which was like a big thing I was doing after the videos, and then I'd have to like get back into work after that.
Now you can just like go right into it.
Yeah, now it's a little bit more straightforward. I don't have all of my morning routine before these videos because they're kind of early, but much less. So it's much less of an interruption. So that was just an interesting thing I noticed. But on to the business tip. So I've been talking about designing your workspace and time for focus. And the first segment we talked about time boxing, like having a routine, time and workspace. And then last time we talked in general about the principles of like decluttering, removing things that distract you from working, right? That like will that are associated with different defaults, right? That if you have something that signals it's playtime, right? Like video game icons on your desktop or whatever, or fun sites on your bookmark, or new sites, or whatever
it is that distracts
bookmark,
you,
right? If you have that, then that will, like, every time you see it, your brain will have to work on ignoring that, right? And so you're increasing your mental load even if you never click on it, but you're also vastly increasing the chance that you'll click on it versus something that you don't see. And the reverse is true. If you have things that inspire you to work, right? So then you want to have those present in your workspace. So
one of the things that I did in a former student dorm type place, apartment that I lived, was in my school workspace, is around me I would have different quotes and other things that if my mind did start to wander and I'd be like la 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 la, I'd see that and be like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing this, and I would bring myself back to it. And so that was really helpful for me. I still haven't set that up in my space over here, but that's on the list eventually. Also, P.S. we have 3 viewers right now.
Hey,
Hi, viewers.
welcome.
Oh, and we just lost 2 of them.
I know, we always scare them away.
Sorry.
So, but you know, if you would love to interact with us, we will respond to your chats live, by the way. That's one of our goals for the show, is to have more people live and be able to have more of a conversation. So please leave your chats and like and subscribe while you're at it. So thank you very much. But I wanted to dive a little bit more into like some of these specific tips, like what can you do to focus? So, you know, obviously, ideally, you have like a separate work computer and a separate play computer, or like other thing computer, personal use computer, in a separate workspace or separate room, or even, you know, leave your building, go to the library, etc. So, you know, those are ideal. But, you know, even in the case that you can't, for example, one thing you could do is you could have all of your work program icons right on the desktop, like in the center, right in your field of view. And then like if you do have icons for other things, for like games or, you know, like personal use apps, you can either collect them in a folder or completely remove it so that you have to actually like search for it.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, SS Papa.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to get the thing open so that we can see the chat better.
Yeah. For some reason it's cut off. I think you have to grab the sidebar and then pull it out, maybe. There you go.
Oh, Ina.
All right. Oh, one of the other of them is their account. Well, thank you, you know, for getting us double the views.
Hey, seriously. It's all good.
Yeah. So, anyway, so like, you know, that icon is an example of like pulling forward the things that remind you of work, that get you into work, and like removing or hiding. That another thing you could do.
You can have different profiles, right?
You can have different profiles. I do that for my browser. So I have my personal profile browser, and even those, like most of the bookmarks are productive ones. Yeah. Like if it's a fun site or whatever, that will be in other bookmarks, or it will just be something that will autocomplete when I type it. Yeah. And so you can have a different Chrome profile is another thing you can do. With icons, we kind of talked about that example last week where they had red food labels for junk food and green for like healthy snack foods, and how people at the workplace had less junk food as a result of that. So you could have like a big no icon for you know, game shortcuts or game folders or things like that, to like just so that your brain doesn't have to do the warning that's not productive or something, like it's already codified for you in a big like no circle. So those are some ideas, like digitally how to do that. There's also Freedom that can block websites and stuff.
Seriously.
So that's a helpful thing to just remind you, especially, you know, if you're typing something and that, you know, that addictive news scrolling website or cool tech gadgets website or whatever comes up, auto-completes, and you just reflexively hit enter, Freedom will be like, no.
Puzzle script games.
Right. You know, whatever. You know, YouTube you could do, right? You could have times where, you know, you can use YouTube for research, but like have, you know, deep focus times where YouTube is not allowed.
And my brother does that. He's got ADHD, very open about it, but it's really hard for him to focus, especially when, you know, he works from home and he's got kids and it's crazy. And so, he has one of those programs that just, he can't even access the stuff that would take him away from work during those hours. And that really has helped him a lot. Yep.
So yeah, that's a great one. And there is another cue that I actually use that's really helpful for me especially to get into the flow state, which is music, right? The right kind of music. So there's music I listen to just for fun. Yeah. And occasionally one of those songs I'll really like for focus or whatever. Or just like one of the songs I hear on the radio a lot on repeat. And what I'll actually do with these songs is I will listen to that single song on repeat until it becomes like background noise. And so one of the hallmarks of like being in a flow focused state, right, where you're really into things, is that like time dilates, right? In a certain way, like you're getting a lot done, so it seems like you have a lot of time.
Yeah.
But in another way, it seems like the, you know, hours fly by, so like time's going really fast. And for me, like the listening to the song on repeat kind of has that effect of like messing with time in a way that makes me feel like a flow state. And so, and it doesn't bother me because you get to the point where it's like background noise. But, you know, there's other things that I will also sometimes do. Like I'll listen to one of those really long, like YouTube lo-fi videos that's like a collection of a lot of songs. So like lo-fi, you know, is great background music. So facts, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So, you know, and that is something that I will listen to it sometimes, other times, but especially because I tend to use that for work, that signals to my brain like, all right, I'm in work mode because I'm listening to lo-fi.
Yeah.
And so you could do that with a particular playlist if you actually like listening to like lo-fi for other things as well. Which, you know, I do occasionally, but that's an example of an environmental cue, sound, that you could use. Some people like going to cafes to have like the background noise of other people. That's there have been studies into like the optimal background noise.
Yeah, when I was last week, when I was it was a holiday in the U.S. and so the library was closed, which meant that I had to go somewhere else. And the only place I could think of was our closest grocery store that has like a little seating area and free Wi-Fi. And it was actually surprisingly good for my concentration. Just there was the perfect level of background noise that wasn't distracting, but it was enough to keep my brain occupied so that that part of my brain that's like overthinking things was a little bit quieter.
Yeah. So, and we tend to focus on visual stimuli, but there's all sorts of other rituals that you could do with other senses. So sound is one of those. You know, it like tactile sensations. I'm trying to think like if you have
Fuzzy blankie
or work hoodie or something.
Work hoodie,
Work hoodie.
I like that.
You know, one of the things that I do, and I'm not sure it's always tactile. I guess it's kind of tactile. Is I wear t-shirts on the weekends, but during weekdays I wear button downs, and not like super fancy button downs. There's a nice cozy flannel, but that does signal to me visually, and like there's a certain like you know different tactile feel to the way a t-shirt fits. That like that this is a work day for me.
Yeah.
So
short form content is a huge problem, and yes, and that's one of the things that I'm actually struggling with right now because. Short form content has a tendency to make it harder for people to focus because we're so used to those fast ones, but it's also what people are consuming right now.
Yeah.
And so like if I want to get my stuff out, long form content like these morning things, it's just not going to work, right? I need to be putting out those TikToks and whatever that are, you know, less than a minute because that's how I'm going to get my face in front of people. So like I'm contributing to their...
The problem.
Right? So that's a hard one.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean...
I don't consume short form content though.
I don't really a lot either. Although like I'm starting to like after I got 200 views on one of my like my weird gremlin shorts about sugar, which was just like one of those fun random experiments. Like you know it is interesting, right? But it was like there's 200 views very quickly and then not a one later. And so one of the differences is like long-term content is a long-term play, right? And so, for instance, someone with like Joe Rogan doing like 3-hour podcasts, right? Like you can binge that stuff once you trust him, and then it's really compelling and really sticky. But he does the short clips of, I mean, and for him, like he doesn't do like usually, well, maybe does TikTok clips, I don't know. But like his short clips are usually like 3 to 10 minute clips of like interesting parts of it, you know, an interview rather than 3 hours, right? And so like there's kind of an attention funnel, I think, that way in terms of short form content. But in terms of like focus on work, right? Like, you know, TikTok would be a good thing to ban on Freedom, for example, or add to your Freedom list. Because it is really easy to scroll, you know, doom scrolling and whatnot. But yeah, thinking about like the tactile thing, or you could make it work for you, right? Like maybe there's a particularly inspiring short that like encapsulates what you want to achieve as a person or in your business. And you could, as long as that is not followed up by another and another and another video, right? If you can find a way for yourself to just like box it to that one video and then move on, right? Like that could be a transition ritual.
Yeah.
Another one that I was thinking about, this came from like Dr. K of Healthy Gamer GG YouTube channel, but he's talking about like anxiety, and one of the things to do with anxiety is, instead of engaging with it right then, you have a scheduled time when you're prepared to engage with it. And then one of the things he recommended, if you're trying not to engage in it, is you go for a walk or clean, because for some reason there's evidence of those things helping with anxiety, which is interesting. So like, if you're anxious about work, an interesting ritual would be like give yourself and put a timer on or something like that, because actually when I start cleaning, I can find like I keep doing it, but like do a 5 or 10 minute like clean of your office. So that's doing a couple things. There's a ritual that you do and will have like a tactile and like kinesthetic aspect to it that will signal a transition to work. It will declutter your space and your brain and reduce anxiety, right?
Yay.
And so like that's an interesting example. You might have to play with what are those rituals for you, based on like what are your needs. Or do you feel anxious about work? Do you need to lower anxiety? And it could be that actually singing for me helps me do that. So if I'm doing something that's gonna make me anxious, right? Then like I'm trying something that's out of my wheelhouse or something like that. That might be a good ritual or whatever. Versus a meditation ritual, right? To like versus listening to a song that gets you pumped up and motivated, right? There's all sorts of different. Countdown. Nice. That's a great one.
Eye of the Tiger. I don't know. There's a
Carry
lot
On My Wayward Son.
Yes.
Makes me feel like a monster hunter. Anyway, my whole point is like, all right, you can like start with, we are very visual creatures, like decluttering your space, decluttering your desktop, pulling forward the things that remind you of work, putting away the things that don't remind you of work, putting fences on with freedom. But then, start to, like, if you've done some of those basics, start really playing with like transition rituals, other senses, so like songs while you work, things you wear to work, what else? I mean, taste is not a big thing, but people do like essentially very often have some kind of, a coffee ritual or like a breakfast ritual with before work. If you're going into the office, like you see this a lot, that people have that.
Yeah, the cup of tea or
right.
Something. Yeah.
Right, something that signals like, all right, this is part of my morning. Like this is what I do when I scan for urgent emails and then get into my work or something like that in the morning.
You get an essential oil for the scent, whatever. Like,
incense, burn incense. So
I love incense.
Well, and so creating positive, associations might be a great way into, if you're having a hard time focusing or undertaking a difficult task. The one caveat I could say to all of these would be that you might want to shake it up. So Alex Huberman, neuroscientist, says, for instance, if you're using music to get you pumped up for exercise, was a specific example, then you kind of get dependent on that dopamine spike, but also that dopamine spike from listening to the music tends to shrink over time. Yeah. So his advice was like flip a coin on whether or not you get to listen to music, and that random reward schedule will keep, the dopamine you get from listening to music higher. He doesn't talk about this, but like it seems like also that gives you a chance to engage your discipline, not constantly, but sometimes when you don't have music to listen to, right? That'll change your focus. And so like I think a lot of this, like if you're going on incense, like you could burn a stick every morning and be like, it is work time.
Yeah.
Right? But if that's like a dopamine hit of some kind for you, that ritual, like becoming dependent on that could make it less effective over time.
Yeah, you acclimate to all kinds of
Right.
things.
And so, anyway, so some of these rituals, like experiment with them. You might notice there is some drop off on some of these rituals, especially if it's like an exciting song or something like that, that very much is a dopamine trigger. That the value of that switches over time. So maybe you switch out songs to make it different, or again, like do the coin flip thing, right? that's your ritual. Like, do I get to listen to Carry On My Wayward Son before I work?
Or do I have to listen to, I don't know, Rick Roll something to let you know?
Anyway, and that's another idea too, is injecting humor into like as a ritual of work,
it's
right?
Great.
Exactly. So, anyway, this is going on 40 minutes. I think that's plenty.
Yes.
So hopefully this has been helpful for thinking about focusing, thinking about triaging outreach, etc. Like, subscribe, add comments. If you're not watching us live, we will also respond to those comments, but please do join us live, 8 a.m. Central Time, every weekday. And until tomorrow, make big changes, one small habit at a time.